Since the beginning of mankind, humans have been fascinated with the planet Mars. But why? Do we have some kind of relationship with Mars? It's also fascinated plasma physicist Dr. John Brandenburg, to the point that he has devoted most of his career to investigating Mars and what may have happened a very long time ago. John, welcome to Beyond Belief.
It's a great honor to be here, George. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And how did a plasma physicist get involved with studying Mars and whether it had origins of life?
Well, the time I grew up in was the time of the space age, and I grew up in Medford, Oregon, also just to the north on the West Coast. There was a lot of military activity during the Cold War, and it kind of kept you on edge all the time. There was constantly strange stuff in the sky. Who knows what it was, and the military would never explain it.
Sure.
And so it kind of gave you a feeling of enhanced reality growing up there. I became a very serious scientist because I was working on plasma physics for nuclear fusion to try and make a better, warmer future for the human race. But part of that was to do laser fusion, which is a miniature hydrogen bomb. So I had to become educated in nuclear weapon physics. I went to graduate school to get my PhD in Livermore Lab.
Great school.
Great school.
Great laboratory system.
Great laboratory. And it was an extension of UC Davis, but I was there on the campus was a nuclear weapons lab where they did also nuclear fusion research. So I was kind of exposed to both worlds, the peaceful uses of nuclear power, and then because of my laser fusion background, nuclear weapon physics. And I was there when the neutron bomb was invented, and the people who invented it were just down the hall from me.
So with this experience in, the possibilities of nuclear power, you then started looking at the planets, right? And Mars, how did this happen?
Part of what happened was I had to shift from peaceful nuclear power to working on death ray. We were working on
like a Tesla death ray.
Like a Tesla death ray. I ended up taking a job in Sandia Labs at Albuquerque, New Mexico, working on charged particle beam weapons. And those were to shoot down missiles, but the Army also wanted to use it as an anti-personnel weapon. So I'd gone from working on peaceful nuclear power, a brighter, warmer future for humanity, to weaponry. And it was a big shift.
Did you like that?
Part of me did. I'm a very patriotic sort of fellow, but part of me was just horrified by this.
And the possibilities.
And the possibilities. Also, the Cold War was such a overpowering presence there. And while I was there, suddenly nuclear winter happened.
What is that?
The nuclear winter was inspired by a dust storm on Mars that covered the entire planet in 1971.
On Mars?
On Mars, from pole to pole, and persisted for 4 months during the Mariner 9 mission. And Carl Sagan and his associates kept wondering, how is it possible to have a storm cover an entire planet from pole to pole?
I would agree.
And last? And then they found out the grim truth that you could get a storm that was circulating vertically, and the same thing could happen on Earth if there was a nuclear war.
When would this storm occur?
It would occur after the nuclear war had occurred. It would create so much dust in the atmosphere.
Weeks, months?
Months. And so more people would die of cold and starvation after the nuclear impact than during it.
So you're saying we're seeing these things happening on Mars now?
That's right. And Mars then became heavily involved in the Cold War because the Cold War was going very unstable at the time. We had an exercise, a NATO exercise called Able Archer that brought us as close to nuclear war as during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
And it happened that same time when the nuclear winter came out. And it filled me with such a feeling of unease and that I'd never felt at Livermore. I'd never felt it that way. I was kind of insulated there.
Was it depression?
No, it was more intense anxiety. And
of something impending?
Well, that we were in a Mexican standoff with the Russians, and all it would take was one mistake, and we would end up in a nuclear war.
And you think this mistake happened on Mars?
that's when things got interesting, because as I was contemplating all of this
Here,
here on Earth, I became aware of the work of DePietro and Molinar finding a face
Face
and
on-
also
at
a
Cydonia.
pyramid, nearby pyramid
Right.
on Mars at Cydonia Mensa.
yeah.
And my heart leaped because I thought, oh my goodness, if we can find a dead civilization on Mars, this will change the conversation on Earth. We can break out of this kind of Cold War mindset. We can do a joint mission with the Russians to Mars. The Cold War could end, and this intense nuclear standoff could end peacefully. And because
As opposed to what might have happened there.
right. And I was then investigating Mars, and I was reading up a Mars article. In those days you had to Xerox everything. So I'm standing in the library at Sandia Labs, which was a wonderful place, by the way,
Right.
full of really wonderful professional people. I'm standing in line to use the Xerox machine to get a scientific article on Mars. And it was about Mars' atmosphere. And Mars' atmosphere is loaded with a peculiar isotope called xenon-129. And I commented, and it made it different than any other place in the solar system. It's very different from Earth, the solar wind, the moon, the meteorites,
Right.
all are very different from Mars in terms of isotopes of xenon. And I mentioned this to this fellow I was standing next to in line, and he said, "Let me see that." And he looked at it, and he had this amazed look on his face, and he said, "Someone nuked them."
Whoa, just like that.
Just like that. And he looked at me, and he said it a second time. That means someone nuked them.
And he was dead serious.
He was dead serious. And then since we were an unclassified part of the lab, it was just the library, he suddenly said, "Pardon me," and he excused himself. And what that meant is that he had spoken out of school. He had spoken about something classified
Well,
in an
and he-
unclassified
and he
area, and it
realized
was
what he did.
yes, and he realized what he did. But I saw his immediate unguarded reaction to this, and apparently there was a part of the lab that did atmospheric monitoring of Earth.
Wow. Now, John, Gaia has a program called Deep Space.
Oh.
And I want to take a look at that because
Yes.
it has a lot to do with this.
If the asteroid belt is really the remnant of an ancient planet between Jupiter and Mars, is it possible a species inhabited this missing planet thousands or even millions of years ago? If that's true, could it be they escaped before its destruction, only to land and inhabit our Earth?
There is an alien presence. It's been here for a very long time. It has reached Earth because of war. John Brandenburg's work opens the question, what happened 300,000 or a million years ago on Mars that he claims the evidence is hard that there were 2 hydrogen bomb explosions?
Very, very possible, isn't it?
Yes. The nuclear weapons experts I have shown this to just say, yes, you've got it right. But they said, don't quote me in public.
Did they blow themselves up from within the planet, or did this come down from above?
The best working hypothesis is that Mars was like Earth and developed a indigenous humanoid species like us.
Okay.
That evolved to a primitive civilization.
Primitive civilization.
It looks primitive. We don't see any roads, airports, anything like that.
Even the face in Cydonia looks Egyptian.
It looks Egyptian or Aztec, Olmec.
Yeah.
The people who carved big heads and helmets were the Olmecs on Earth. They're also very mysterious. Nobody knows where they came from. And but it appears that there was a primitive civilization on Mars, and then somebody attacked them from space because of the explosions were airbursts of two massive nuclear weapons.
How big would they be?
Oh,
What would they look like?
They would have looked like the Empire State Building.
That big?
Yes.
Huge.
Huge. They would have been easily constructible in the asteroid belt from the materials in the asteroid belt, then brought to Mars and dropped on Mars.
Why would anyone want to destroy what was on the planet at the time?
I don't know. All I know is there's precedent on Earth
we
for
sure it
people
wasn't a-
wiping out other people.
Well, but that's worrying. So
Yes.
are we sure that maybe there wasn't a war on Mars?
It looks as though the Martians, it may be the face on Mars. In fact, Mark Carlotto's versions of the face on Mars, it looks quite threatening.
Right.
It looks like it's baring its teeth at somebody in outer space. So it could be that the people on Mars had a beef with somebody
Or
in
they-
outer
And they
space.
ticked somebody off.
Or
for
they
some
take,
reason.
yes, and somebody got annoyed with them. Who knows? Maybe the people from outer space were abducting their people and mutilating their cattle.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe.
And in any case, I believe if we go up there and land and investigate, we will find out possibly who the other people were,
Maybe.
because the Martians themselves would have recorded it.
There seems to be remnants on Mars.
Yes.
Of something past, right?
Right. There are two lines now of intelligent activity on Mars. One is the what looks like eroded archaeology dating from a Earth-like period on Mars. We found remnants of this at Cydonia Mensa, the face and the pyramid, the DNM pyramid. Also at another place called Galaxis Chaos, which I myself discovered.
Okay.
And there apparently are two faces there, one of which looks just like the face at Cydonia, except it's smaller.
If this happened, John, when do you think it occurred?
It looks like it dates from the time when Mars had an ocean and was Earth-like.
Billions of years ago?
No, probably about 250 million years ago.
Which is nothing in the scheme of time.
In geologic time, quite recently. As I mentioned, there are two lines of evidence for intelligent activity. One is the archaeological remnants, what appear to be archaeological remnants. The other one is the evidence for massive nuclear explosions on Mars.
Would you put your career on the line on this theory?
I have.
And you have.
I mean, it's a hypothesis, it's a theory. People ask me, do you really know this? And I say, of course not. But the evidence
shows
the
that
evidence
something
supports
happened.
this, and no one has officially contradicted me. I've been waiting.
Right.
And in fact, some critics, I've challenged them to debates on various talk shows, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to debate Brandenburg." So
They can't win. That's why.
well, that's right.
They
So at this point, my conclusion, in fact, is that the government wanted this to come out. In fact, our government has known since 1976 that this occurred, and has decided that it is time for it to come out.
Why
Because
not just publicly come out with it? Why not have a news conference with NASA scientists? And they say, we believe Mars was inhabited and that it underwent some kind of catastrophe.
Yes.
We believe the catastrophe was nuclear. Here's Dr. John Brandenburg to tell us more. Why don't they do it like that?
I do not have any insight. All I know is that Dana Rohrabacher, congressman from California, was asking questions to visiting NASA scientists in a congressional hearing, and asked them, was there a dead civilization, or is there a dead civilization on Mars that you haven't told us about? And they all looked at each other like, we don't know what to say.
But
and
they knew the answer, didn't they?
They knew the answer, and so apparently this is now circulating in Washington, D.C., and Mike Pence said that we're going to have American boots on the face of Mars.
Right.
And the face of Mars is the NASA logo, term for the face at Cydonia.
Is it conceivable, and I have to ask you directly, may you be part of the government's program to leak this information to us?
I apparently am an unwitting, clueless part of it. I will say that. All I'm saying is that we informed the Defense Intelligence Agency, Vince DiPietro and I, when we found this evidence. And after 6 months, they got back to us through channels and said, why don't you publish it?
Wow.
Yes.
So they basically endorsed your work.
Right. They basically,
John, that's huge.
In a very unofficial kind of back channel way.
Almost like saying, let's let him do it, we don't have to do it, and just let it.
Right. In a very deniable fashion, they basically turned me loose.
Kind of hands off on
Yes.
their part.
But I do believe that this has now become common currency among the really cognoscenti in Washington, D.C., that there was a dead civilization, or at least there's that possibility, and that it was wiped out by a nuclear holocaust. of undetermined origin.
Would everyone on that planet have been extinguished
Yes.
instantly?
It would have
Men,
destroyed
women,
the planetary
children,
environment.
Animals,
Yes,
trees,
everything. Someone destroyed Mars in a way that they never wanted it to recover.
And they geographically situated the
Two-
attack, right?
Yes, the two regions of residual radioactivity on Mars, which are very weak, but they're
Right.
still, they're easily detectable, and thorium and potassium are correlated with Cydonia Mensa and Galaxis Chaos, this other center of civilization.
Would there still be huge radiation levels on Mars if we went there and tested for that?
There certainly would be levels of radiation in these areas that would be easy to detect for human beings. I don't think it would be any, that this would present any hazard for humans unless maybe they dug down below the soil deeply in the centers of these areas.
Frightening, because it could happen here.
Oh, it could happen here. One of the reasons I published this now was because I sense a growing danger of nuclear war between us and China
Or Korea.
or Korea. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want this planet to end up looking like Mars.
Why are there still nuclear firestorms and these storms on Mars
Well,
all
Mars,
these years later,
Mars is in an interesting place in the solar system. It's right next to the asteroid belt.
right?
In fact, it defines the inner edge of the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is kind of constantly expanding because of Jupiter stirs it up. And then Mars kind of intercepts some of those asteroids before they can go hit Earth. So Mars is in a very bad neighborhood. It gets frequent impacts.
For us, it was in the right spot.
For us, it's in the right spot. Yes, Mars's grief was our good times because Mars absorbed a lot of asteroids that could have hit the Earth.
Nothing wrong with being the third rock from the sun, is there?
There's nothing wrong with it. And still, there are mass extinctions on Earth, one of which corresponds to roughly the same time frame as this occurrence on Mars. It was called the Great Permian Extinction. And in my book, Death on Mars, I urge scientists that if they see any isotopic anomalies associated with the Great Permian Extinction,
Right.
whose cause is unknown, by the way, wiped out 90% of life on Earth, even in the oceans, and occurred about the same time as this thing on Mars happened.
You've talked about the Pentagon and their involvement in some of this. Let's take a look.
A building, an institution, a symbol of America's military might, the Pentagon. Here, headquartered under one roof, is the Department of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the 5 branches of the U.S. military. Commands issued from behind these walls direct the actions of U.S. forces around the world.
The Pentagon is the heart, the soul, the brain of our national military community.
It does house the entire top of the defense establishment of the United States. It is regarded as an icon, if you will, for enemies and allies.
I spent a week there with the Navy during
Yes.
my day. And,
I've been down there too.
It's a fascinating place indeed, and there's a lot of power and information there.
I was down there 3 days before 9/11. It was my first response when we found this evidence of a nuclear holocaust on Mars to report it to the Pentagon.
Were you shocked when you discovered this?
Yes.
Were you saddened?
I was
Can you imagine?
absolutely horrified. I began having nuclear war nightmares like I'd had when I was young, where I would be standing next to my children and
Yeah.
watching the whole world being destroyed by nuclear weapons. And part of my way of getting over that was to write the book Death on Mars and get it all out there.
Yeah. It could have been a thriving civilization
Yes,
that was immediately extinguished.
yes.
It's just mind-boggling, though, to try to comprehend why would another universal body of people
Yes.
destroy them. They must have done something horrendous, or they wanted to take over the planet, but they rendered the planet useless for even now, right?
I thought of Mars as kind of, when I first encountered this, as like the planet Alderaan in Star Wars.
Yes.
To use a science fiction analogy. And it was Alderaan was destroyed because it served as a good example. It was destroyed to terrorize the surrounding people. We've had many things like that happen in human history. The Mongols created pyramids of skulls when they would, if a city resisted them.
Vlad the Impaler put heads
Oh, absolutely.
coming up into the city, so people who would see that knew how horrible he was.
Yes.
And they backed off.
The Turks,
You know.
the whole Turkish army turned around and went home
Yeah.
after encountering this forest of impaled bodies and heads.
Any leader who puts heads on spears lining the road, we don't want anything to do with him.
So there is precedence on a much smaller scale in human history.
Is it possible, let's add something to your equation of Mars, that maybe they didn't have the Egyptian kind of civilization, but maybe they were high-tech themselves.
Perhaps.
Maybe they had nukes. Maybe there was some kind of war between the Martians.
It's eminently possible. We're trying to determine the level of a civilization from pictures from outer space. And some of the rover pictures, by the way, one of them appears to depict some kind of like clockwork, like the Antikythera computer, only this is on Mars.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of artifacts.
There's
that
a
if
lot
you
of
look
things
there.
they're encountering that look like they could be remnants of a civilization, perhaps blown there or perhaps indigenous to that area. It was on the seashore.
Robot heads and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the level of civilization there was. I say we have to go up there, so you have to send people who can dig. Any archaeologist who's worth his salt will tell you, you have to dig for good archaeology.
I've always said we won't know until we go.
No.
You know, and that's the thing.
You could send robot rovers and have them drive around Cydonia Mensa for a year, especially if the people in charge are in charge. They won't find anything.
Do you think we're going to get to Mars?
Yes. I believe that, as I said, in a clueless way, I'm fitting into somebody's scheme to get to Mars, and they have to justify flying to Mars ain't like flying to the moon.
No.
You can't wear diapers all the way
it's
there.
a mission.
It's a mission.
Is it a one-way trip?
I think the initial party should count on staying on Mars for like 5 years,
Oh my gosh.
simply because getting back from Mars is a lot more dangerous than landing there.
That's the problem.
Landing there, you need basically a heat shield and a big parachute,
Yeah.
maybe some retro rockets. You can land on Mars very easily. It's coming back, erecting a big rocket on the surface of Mars. That is the really dangerous part. So I would urge the initial expedition to basically just camp out there for 5 years. Also, we should land on Phobos and convert it into a space station
Okay.
to give psychological
Interesting.
support to the people on the ground. I mean, here's this big space station full of groceries. They've got an infirmary. You know,
Yep.
you can be there in a couple hours using maybe an emergency kind of lifter. And just going back to Phobos that's a fairly easy thing to manage compared to coming back to Earth from the surface of Mars.
What if you put up a space station near Mars?
Oh, yes.
that you could live on?
The reason I mentioned Phobos is because it's psychologically very important. Once this comes out and is widely discussed, as it is now, and it becomes official, there will one day be an official announcement, I believe,
I think so.
from NASA and the Defense Department that, yes, we're looking at the possibility of a dead civilization that was wiped out by a nuclear holocaust. And once...
What a dramatic story.
Once it becomes official,
Yes.
then everyone gets this weak feeling in their knees and a sinking feeling. And it becomes very important that we go establish a presence in the Mars system. Mars is not a planet, it's a system.
It could tell you what happens here if we keep up on the
Oh.
path we're on.
Bolden, the head of NASA, commented, he said, going to Mars, sending humans to Mars is essential to our future survival because he knows about this.
Stephen Hawking wants us to leave the planet within 100 years.
Oh, I believe moving out into the universe, especially, and Mars is the gateway to the stars, is essential to human survival.
SpaceX's Elon Musk, founder of Tesla Motors,
Yes.
wants to go to Mars.
Absolutely.
At the SpaceX factory in Hawthorne, California, they are going boldly where no small company has ever gone before, building spacecraft that are meant to open up the final frontier in ways that are hard to fathom, unless you're Elon Musk.
I'm talking about sending ultimately tens of thousands, eventually millions of people to Mars and then going out there and exploring the stars.
Musk is the CEO and Chief Technology Officer of 10-year-old Space Exploration Technologies, as it is more formally known. He has staked $100 million of the fortune he made founding PayPal to pursue a lofty goal, to make access to space an order of magnitude cheaper than it is right now.
Is there any doubt in your mind that this is the way NASA and the country should go as it looks toward the future in space?
No, not at all. This is not a path. It's the only path that will succeed. If this doesn't succeed, nothing will.
Is he nuts, John? Or is he serious?
Oh, no, he is sane.
Millions
he
of
is the
people on
one-eyed
Mars?
man in the land of the blind.
Interesting.
He sees exactly what I see. He's probably aware of my research,
I'm sure he is.
at least
Everybody
as a
else is.
possibility.
Robert Zubrin wants to terraform Mars.
Yes.
He believes it's conceivable.
Yes.
If we're going to inhabit the planet, shouldn't we be starting that now?
I believe Bob Zubrin is once again a very visionary person, a one-eyed man in the land of the blind. He's also figured out how to, exploit Martian resources. Mars was at one time intensely radioactive. All of that has disappeared now.
It's gone.
We can revive the biosphere of Mars. In fact, I believe there's still bacterial remnants of the past.
It won't take much then if that's there.
Oh, I think that once we set up a living thing on
There we
Mars,
go.
you'll find, Mars bacteria and other organisms suddenly appear, just like stray cats or dogs,
don't you
looking
think-
for a meal from our waste products and stuff.
Don't you think the Mars bacteria is also the Earth bacteria? We're all one and
Oh,
the
yes.
same?
I believe very much in what's called panspermia, which was advocated a long time ago. The fact that life on Earth and Mars, based on the ALH 84-7 results, which were, I believe, very solid, life on Mars and on Earth apparently started almost simultaneously.
I think so, too.
As soon as there was liquid water on Earth, you had
That
life
was
on
the
Earth.
soup.
The soup. And by the way, this idea of the primordial soup suddenly spontaneously generating bacteria, I don't believe that anymore at all. I think that's we were seeded from outer space. Life began in a galaxy far,
Far,
far
far
away a
away.
long time ago,
That's
and
right.
apparently spread throughout the
And
cosmos.
it's happening all over the place.
I know.
Maybe we call it the God factor, but it's still happening.
Whatever you want to call it, apparently life is part of the universe.
You are part of an investigation called IMIT. IMIT.
Yes, it was the independent Mars investigation team started by Richard Hoagland.
All right.
And he's a brilliant guy. That organization kind of went away once we'd presented our results at the Case for Mars 2 project. And by the way, news spread very quickly that we had found what appeared to be a Mars ocean. I had found that. And
Years before
absolutely.
government even announced
This
water
was in
on Mars.
1984.
Isn't that amazing?
Well, the first person to propose a extinct Mars ocean was Percival Lowell.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like it was a new idea, but we had found, based on the Viking data, that Cydonia Mensa and this other place in Utopia, Galaxis Chaos, appeared to be on the shores of an ancient ocean. And so we published that, and one of the Mars scientists at the conference, I ran into him at Sandia Labs. He was there for a visit, and he said, we really liked your Mars ocean. We didn't know what to think about your pictures, but we liked your Mars ocean. Why don't you just put a paper out on that? So I did. And at the Mecca conference, I spoke to an audience of about 1,000 Mars scientists and showed a
Fascinated by this.
vast ocean covering
Yeah.
the north of Mars and lasting for most of Mars history.
How deep do you think?
Oh, it was like close to a mile deep.
Not as deep as Earth.
No,
obviously.
it was not as it would be more like the Mediterranean Sea, something like that. But it covered Mars, and it's on the youngest part of Mars, meaning this ocean lasted for most of Mars' geologic history.
Did the nuclear holocaust eradicate the ocean too?
Yes, once you water on Mars is not stable unless you have an ozone layer. If you get rid of the ozone layer, then
Everything
Mars
falls apart.
ocean evaporates. It's broken up by ultraviolet.
It doesn't come back down.
No,
in the
it doesn't
fall
come
rain.
back down. The oxygen is left behind and turns the soil bright red. The hydrogen escapes to outer space.
Well, you know, when I was a kid, without scientific instruments or anything, just a kid,
Yes.
I always thought that some kind of calamity occurred on Mars. I didn't know what it was, Joe.
Dick Hoagland found a science fiction comic book that talks about a face on Mars and a great
Yes.
cataclysm on Mars.
Way before.
Way before, 1958.
Yeah.
The space age had just begun. Here's the face on Mars, and it looks almost like what they found.
Yeah. How do you explain that?
Well,
There leaked information?
there's, I believe in the Jungian collective unconscious.
Yeah.
Part of us knows what happened on Mars.
The
Has
same
known
thing-
since Percival Lowell, by the way.
The same thing has happened with the Oklahoma City bombing of the Federal Building. It has happened about 9/11.
Yes.
There were books written about things like that
Oh,
before they happened.
The Fight Club shows
You know,
buildings collapsing,
Yeah.
and it came out before 9/11, and they collapsed in the movie just
yeah,
like they
it's
did in
bizarre.
9/11.
It's bizarre. How
And in
this
fact, when I
happens.
saw the movie Pearl Harbor, I thought something like Pearl Harbor is going to happen to us. It's where we're being keyed up for that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, 9/11 happened. I was working for the Pentagon at the time, and
If those on Mars were destroyed by beings from outside, what's to prevent those beings from coming here and doing the same thing to us?
whoever did it, I think, is long gone. And
do?
I believe cosmic karma has probably caught up with them eventually.
Maybe they blew themselves up.
Maybe they blew themselves up eventually. Well, you discover that people who live very violent, they live by the sword, they die by the sword, and I believe that law pervades the cosmos. It's just not on Earth, but I think that it shows that there are elements in the universe. It could be that the most dangerous thing for intelligent life in the universe is other intelligent life, as on Earth. Just turn on the news. And so I think that we have to become spacefaring. Our response to this is we must become spacefaring. We must try to achieve Captain Kirk flying the Starship Enterprise around.
Right. I agree with that. You know, I had just mentioned Stephen Hawking.
Yes.
Let's take a look exactly
Stephen
at what
Hawking,
he said.
smart guy.
Stephen Hawking is putting his humans must leave Earth in 100 years theory to the test. As part of the series Tomorrow's World, the BBC documentary called Stephen Hawking Expedition Earth will test whether or not humans will perish in 100 years if we don't colonize another planet. BBC says the documentary will show that Professor Hawking's ambition isn't as fantastical as it sounds, and that science fact is closer to science fiction than we ever thought. The renowned physicist has warned the human race is in danger for years, citing everything from nuclear war, genetically engineered viruses, and long overdue asteroid strikes. And Hawking says that our best chance for survival is to move to another planet, the nearest possible solutions being the moon or Mars.
John, are we the Martians? Could they have come here?
It is very possible that Mars life became a thriving institution several million years before it began
With
really on
intelligent
Earth.
life and everything else.
Right. I think Mars is a smaller planet. I think it cooled off quicker. It achieved an ocean earlier in its lifetime. So it's possible that Mars had a very active biosphere when Earth was still just dealing with a few little bacterial colonies. Asteroid impacts on Mars would have, and it's next to the asteroid belt, would have spread Mars life, which would have been more advanced. It's possible the Precambrian explosion, which was an explosion was actually an invasion from Mars.
Could have been.
Triggered by an asteroid impact on Mars, and it spread, spewed things here. And all this tough, advanced Mars life arrived, predator-prey relationships. And then, of course, the Earth life had to evolve to deal with that. And so eventually the two things merged. So we are at least part Martian, at least in a genetic sense.
Might the
But we all come from panspermia anyway.
Exactly. Might the villains who destroyed Mars have been the Zechariah Sitchin Anunnaki that came here in genetically altered creatures that were on Earth? Might they be one and the same?
Once one allows the idea of intelligent life traveling between stars, visiting planets,
Anything's possible.
the possibilities become myriad. We are already genetically modifying all sorts of things. We should be careful that we don't start genetically modifying ourselves to any degree.
We just may, sadly.
Yes, well, they used to have a thing called eugenics. It was a very popular scientific idea before World War II. After World War II, not so much.
John, are you popular with the personnel at NASA?
I wouldn't say I'm popular. I would say I'm more infamous than famous.
You are.
They've been told not to talk to me, basically.
Do you have some friends there?
Oh, yes, yes.
And
I've gone down to NASA headquarters many times. And
enemies?
Oh, one can't do any kind of... The life of a scientist is to hope for a great discovery, but in making great discoveries, science is very competitive. One always creates enemies when one announces some new discovery.
If all this happened the way you have unfolded it,
yes,
what does that mean to us on this planet?
It means the human race is not an aberration on the cosmos. It's part of its fabric.
Is there a warning for us?
Oh, absolutely. The same thing that happened on Mars could happen to us. We could do it to ourselves, which is one of my deep fears.
Yeah.
I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. I want them to grow up free of the fear of nuclear war. But at the same time, we must become spacefaring. We can't just sit here and wait for something like happened to Mars, happen here. Somebody from outside the solar system comes here, decides that we're too noisy, we're too threatening, and decides to put an end to us.
Robert Oppenheimer, our father of the modern age of
Yes.
nuclear abilities, I think developed the atomic bomb based on old types of writings that he found in India.
Yes.
And he was convinced by reading it that they had some kind of nuclear war, that it happened to them.
I have read those passages from the Gitas. It appears that there was...
So maybe civilization here did the same thing.
Well,
Not
if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it appears like there was an extraterrestrial colony here that, for some internal reason, had split and then had a nuclear war between each other.
Exactly. Again,
maybe
the same people who are on Mars.
Maybe
Who
so.
knows?
Who knows? The time frame of the occurrences on Mars seem to have been much earlier than recorded in the Gitas. The human race has been around in its present form on Earth for like 200,000 years. Only 6,000 years of that do we have any real substantial record. We've now found this place in Turkey that is 10,000 years old.
Göbekli Tepe. That's right.
Astonishing archaeological find.
There's so much that we don't know.
We don't know. All these legends of Atlantis, which said that it was an advanced civilization of the human race, and then was wiped out in some great cataclysm. In the Bible, and I'm just an Episcopalian, but I'm just an Episcopalian, but I do read the Bible. And just before the story of Noah, which records an extinction level event that wiped out most of the human race and almost all animal life on Earth, and that people were saved by this ark or some kind of vessel.
That's a parable somewhere.
That's
I
right.
think,
Well, it
but
occurs
still.
in many other cultures
Yeah.
have the same legend. But just before that in the Bible, it is written, it says, the sons of God saw that the daughters of earth were very beautiful, and they took of them wives whomever they wanted, and they got laser ray guns. Who's going to stop them? Who's going to protest?
Exactly.
And they said the offspring of these unions were great men, of whom many legends are
giants.
written. Right. Well, you can interpret it as giants, or you can just say men of great intellectual or physical stature, and that's in the Bible.
Yep.
So all of these Greek legends, all of these legends
It's all
from the
laid
Hindu,
out for us.
it's all laid out. Beings from the sky came down and had unions with earth women and produced children. Apparently they'd been cooped up on spaceships a long time.
Way too long.
And so this is a science fiction scenario, I will admit, and but it's in the Bible, and it's all these other legends. So I think that especially when one considers that we are intelligent life in the universe, and the universe thrives with other intelligent life, that the possibilities are just beyond
Endless,
comprehension.
endless. John, if you went to Mars today,
Yes.
what do you think you would want to see?
I would first land at Cydonia Mensa and dig. I would start looking for cuneiform tablets. I would look for murals depicting life on Mars. All of this stuff would be buried under many feet, many meters of debris.
Because it looks like whatever happened there, everything is scattered everywhere in pieces.
It looks like all archaeology on Earth is eroded.
Right.
The very same environment that allows human life to flourish on Earth also creates erosive forces which destroy our archaeology. And so all archaeology is eroded. The face on Mars, the pyramid near to it, they look like they're eroded archaeology. And that means there's a lot of buried stuff. We seem to have found what may have been a city like of structures near the pyramid.
That's dramatic.
It's almost, it
dramatic.
looks like it housed maybe 1 million people.
Yeah, what a great discovery.
Oh,
Does
So-
it change humankind?
oh, it will profoundly change humankind.
We should also look at Mars as a blueprint for what could happen here.
Right. We can restore Mars. We can restore it to life. In fact, I say in my book, Death on Mars, that we should erect a great, if I am correct, that there is a dead civilization on there, we should erect a great memorial to them. But the greatest memorial we can make to the dead inhabitants of Mars is to revive Mars and make it a living planet again.
Absolutely. John, thanks for being on Beyond Belief.
Oh, it's a wonderful
Remarkable
honor to
work,
be
my
here,
friend.
George. Thank you
Just
so much.
remarkable work. As I was saying, since I was a little boy, I've been fascinated with Mars. But when you talk to someone like PhD Dr. John Brandenburg, who has spent his life and career investigating what may have happened on that red planet, it is truly remarkable. It is probably one of the greatest discoveries I've ever come across. Thank you again, John.
Thank you for having me here.
Fantastic work. Thanks for watching Beyond Belief.